5 more facts about the QL and exercises that are going to help you train the area much more effectively. Things we're going to be covering is looking at the QL muscle and its function. So we're going to be talking about stability, its contraction, buttresses, moment arm, and activity. So we can start to move away from unnecessary exercises like side bends, because whenever I look at videos about the QL, it's all about side bends and how it's apparently going to enhance the area. But unfortunately, that isn't going to happen because it's using a bodybuilding philosophy in a functional setting. So we need to use a functional a functional perspective in a functional setting. This changes the rules of the game because bodybuilding and isolating muscles, again, there's nothing wrong with it per se. It's just got to be used at the right time in the right way for the right people. Most people don't need it. What most people need is good function. Number 1 is it's providing stability. It's not there as like a movement muscle. And a movement muscle I would describe as glute max or quadriceps or bicep or triceps. Those I would call movement muscles. The elbow flexes, the bicep flexes the elbow, the tricep extends the elbow. Yes, there are stabilizing elements to it because of the way they are inserted onto the shoulder blade, but their primary function is to move the elbow, or certain parts of the bicep is to move the elbow. Certain aspects of it are stability, but primarily it's movement. With regards to the QL, it's much more of a stabilizing muscle. So it provides, as described here, a stabilizing role by attaching to each lumbar vertebra. So you can see here, L5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then up onto the rib cage and down onto the pelvis. And we're going to revisit that structure in a later slide because, again, as we're going to find out, this stabilizing theme will continue on through it. It's involved in stabilization along with the obliques. So what we've got here are the obliques that come down essentially, again, in this sort of area. And what it's doing is it's stabilizing the spine into the pelvis. Yes, we've got the SI joint, which is doing some degree of stability. But what we've then got are these two muscles out here, which have got a much longer, what is known as moment arm. So that would be the obliques. That would be the QL, and this would be the obliques. So they are very effective at stabilizing and essentially holding down the spine onto the pelvis. So number 1 is it's a stabilizing muscle. I'm going to talk about that in future slides. Number 2 is a very important one. As you can see here, it contracts what is known as isometrically. Now this essentially is a static contraction. So again, as I've mentioned in the first slide, it's not a movement muscle, it's a stabilizing muscle. And this is how, again, if we're talking about training it, if its function is to stabilize, we need to start choosing exercises that encourage the QL to fire and increase stability, because that is how we train this muscle. So it contracts isometrically, which, as I mentioned, is a static contraction. So it's not there to bend the spine. It's there to hold down the spine. If we look from both sides, it's there to hold down the spine against the pelvis. So that's the kind of thing that we need to be looking at with regards to the QL. So it's holding it in position, essentially. How do we do that? Well, one great genre of exercises, or group of exercises, whatever you want to call it, are carrying exercises. You can see me on the screen here. I'm carrying it up in the rack position. But if you go into something like a suitcase carry, which is where I would have my arm down here, and then again, sort of the kettlebell would be down in this position. So again, what would happen is as soon as I would lift this leg here, all the muscles, so glute medius, glute minimus down here, obliques up here, obviously QL in here, are all going to fire to hold this part of the pelvis in place. So what we're then not going to do is getting sort of big drops and movements as we step within the pelvis. Yes, there do need to be movements within the pelvis, but they don't need to be excessive, and there needs to be some degree of smoothness to it, because if it's jerky and excessive, it's going to start causing problems not only through the pelvis but potentially in the spine as well. So it's very important that we understand that it contracts isometrically. If it does that, what is the point of a side bend? Because functionally it's not a side bending muscle. Number 3 continues this stability idea of the QL, and as you can see here, it buttresses the adjoining vertebra on both sides. Now you can see here there are 2 diagrams, completely different diagrams, but similar in certain ways. So obviously this is of the torso, and you can see the QL muscle highlighted here. This is of a church or a cathedral that's been built, and in some respects sort of the architecture of it. Now, these are buttressing this wall and supporting it and holding it in place. So if we take, we've got the spine here, we've got the spine here. We've got these arms that join onto the wall. We've got these arms that join onto each of the vertebra of the spine. What we've then got is this support structure down here, and essentially we've got the support structure down here. So what we've got is architecturally something that is there, that isn't there, or that isn't there to contract and get smaller. As we talked about in the last slide, it's there to contract isometrically to make sure this wall or this spine doesn't move, to create that stability, to hold it in place, so when the pelvis is moving, there's not this sort of wobbling nature of the spine and the pelvis, if that makes sense. So what we're trying to do again is create that stability, create that foundation of the pelvis and the spine being held together using the QL muscle. And again, as we described in the last one, obliques will be involved, and also glute medius and glute minimus as well. Number 4 is the moment arm. This again highlights the stabilizing role of the QL. So what we need to do is again look at this diagram over here, and what we've got is this base where it's basically held on the rib cage and on the pelvis. Now again, if you've seen any of my other videos where I talk about the psoas, that has a much shorter moment arm, so it's slightly less effective for stabilizing the spine, for the very simple reason is it's much closer to the spine. So again, the moment arm only comes to here, whereas the QL comes out to here. So fibers cross-link the vertebra and has a large moment arm, and it is effective in stabilizing in all loading modes. So again, that's important to understand as well. So what we've got is this moment arm. So again, it's much more effective when we turn it out here than if we turn it in here. So it's going to be much more stabilizing if we're out here than if we're in here. So it's important to understand that. So number 4 is all about the moment arm. Number 5, very simply, is it's active in all positions: flexion, extension, lateral bending, and twisting. So we've got flexion, extension, side bending, and twisting. So it's active in all of them. So if we go into a deadlift, it's active. What we need to understand is that by training it as a movement muscle, it's ineffective, because whatever position we go into, it's active. So we need to be there stabilizing the spine using much more effective exercises like I've talked about with regards to carrying exercises, even the bird dog, the side plank, so on and so forth. So these types of exercises are going to be much more effective at stabilizing the spine and working the QL than your side bends, because not only are you going to be activating the muscle, it's going to be worked in a way that is designed to function. So hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully it's given you a better idea of the QL muscle and how to train it. Many thanks for watching. I'll speak to you in the next tutorial.